And kind of moving on to life after the Bay Area. So you went on to go study at Columbia and Juilliard, which it still kind of blows my mind how people do that. I mean, because I know NEC and Harvard are the only other schools, as far as I'm aware, that have this dual program. And you earned your bachelor's in economics at Columbia and your master's at Juilliard in cello.
That's right.
Um, so can you talk a little bit about how you juggled both endeavors? And also, how did your work at Columbia fuel your work as a cellist, if at all, and vice versa?
That's a great question. I'm very uh, proud to say that I did the Columbia-Juilliard program. I think in hindsight, it was one of the best decisions of my life. And I remember at the time going into it, I had a lot of questions from folks about, why aren't you just going straight into music school? And, is this some sort of a backup plan or whatnot?
Mhm,
And I think it was a combination of lots of things. First of all, being uh, very heavily invested into academics growing up.
mhm,
Even though cello was a big part of my life, I think my family's values were such that, you still have to do great work in school. And I think always maintaining these dual sides of my life, um, while sometimes it made it difficult to really put in lots and lots of hours in the cello,
mhm,
I think it made me a hopefully a more well-rounded person in terms of really thinking about music and life in general from as many perspectives as possible.
mhm,
And so I know when I was at college in the program, the very first thing uh, that made an impression on me is that the people around me, they're as good as at what they do as what I do in the cello. I mean, they
mhm.
started very young,
Yeah.
becoming scientists or biologists or some of the math, these people that were just geniuses at math.
Mhm.
uh, it was very humbling,
Yeah.
to say the least. And so I think in my sophomore year, I kind of made this realization that, wow, the passion that these people have in what they're doing at Columbia is what I have in the cello. And so I started around sophomore year shifting my focus back into cello.
Mhm,
Maybe also naivete, thinking in college maybe I would pursue something else. I wasn't
mhm,
100% committed to the cello at that stage.
mhm.
But that time there made me realize that cello is really, I think, what I was meant to do on this earth.
Right.
Um, let's see. What was the other part of your question? I'm forgetting.
Oh, just yeah, how your work at Columbia fueled your work on the cello and vice versa. So,
Oh, right.
yeah.
Um, from a very practical point of view, uh, ch- I think I had to become extremely efficient in my practice. um, um, I think that's when I started uh, becoming on team night practice, hashtag team night practice.
Yeah.
Uh, I know a lot of people like to get up early and, pump in a couple hours before breakfast. That is not me at all. I value those hours
Yeah.
greatly, and
Yeah.
my REM sleep is in full blast in the morning.
Right.
And so, even now, sometimes my best practice is after a concert, just getting into a practice room and just really putting in a couple hours until 1 or 2 in the morning. So that was one thing that Columbia taught me. Another thing is, let's see. I think it was Pablo Casals that said that you're a human being first, then an artist, then a cellist.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great perspective to have on all people and uh, points of interest in life.
Mhm.
Um, the cello is a very sacred thing, of course,
Right.
to all of us musicians. But if you zoom out a little bit, it's really the act of communication
Yeah.
and then really about connecting with other humans. And
Right.
so I think being at Columbia really enforced that you can't directly talk to somebody about uh, music theory or how smooth bow changes are, but you talk about, oh, when I want to make transitionary material,
Yeah.
how do I connect concepts together in a very
Mhm.
smooth fashion?
Mhm.
That's something that everybody can understand.
Right.
And I think coming from coming from that perspective as a musician is really wonderful, because it kind of forces you to zoom out, and I think it ultimately makes you a better communicator on the instrument when you think about just how diverse an audience can be.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I love that you brought up the Casal's quote and also just talking about how it kind of forced you to broaden your horizon because I think as musicians, it's very intrinsic. It's very much a necessity for us to kind of zoom out and
Yes.
experience life outside of music and then bring what we experience back into music. And, you know, I think there's a point in all of our lives where we need to spend 5, 6 hours in the practice room regularly, of course, for our development.
Right.
But I think if you sustain that for an extended period of time, then your music starts to get almost a little stale because I mean,
Hmm.
I think you've obviously probably experienced that yourself where you've probably seen colleagues perform and you're blown away by their accuracy and their proficiency, but you can tell that they just spent a lot of time in the practice room. And I mean, again, everyone has a different method in approaching music, but I think when you just kind of lock yourself in a room and practice for that long, then you almost start to kind of lose the value and the reason for music, I think. And so,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, and so I'm really glad that you brought up that point about zooming out a little bit and
Hmm.
living life. Yeah.
Yeah. It's always been a difficult struggle for me because, uh, you know, there are similar to what you're saying about you can see people who've practiced a lot, but maybe haven't had those life experiences. I feel also you can tell people that have lots of life experience but just haven't put in the put in the hours,
Yeah.
and it's very frustrating
Yeah,
because they
yeah,
could be so great. So
yeah.
it, I always am thinking about this, and in a way, because maybe I didn't have all those hours to begin with uh, in that stage, sometimes I feel like I'm catching up
Mhm.
technically to meet myself musically.
Mhm.
Actually, maybe as a general rule, I've always felt musicality has come more easily to me. And so the
Sure.
part I really work on personally is trying to maintain and enhance my technique because that doesn't come as easily to me. And
Mhm.
I always wonder what happens if I really was practicing like crazy. Maybe I could be an even greater cellist today.
Uh,
Such is life.
yeah, so yeah, exactly.